Hey, we're
Hey,
on. Hey, we're a
welcome
little, just a
everyone.
few minutes early over here, so we can sort of get things out of the way because we do have. I have our spring break stuff is coming up next week for me. I think you probably just had yours, but of course you have work because it's
Right.
Friday. And when are they going to make us do stuff?
Always
Fridays.
on Friday.
Always on
Yeah, they
Friday
love them.
afternoons. So I wish we should if we're once we figure out how a lot of this works. Yep, we're still figuring it out. Maybe we can have little things like, is anyone out there getting meetings on Friday afternoons? Vote, and then we watch them
Oh,
live
yeah,
as they vote.
fly them up.
That'd be cool.
We'd
Actually, we're
actually
coming
have
up.
to have people watching those. See, I mean, that's the
Yes,
right. We don't ever say, "Hey, subscribe." We don't ever say,
that's
leave us a
true.
like or anything like that. We're just,
We're
if
just
you're
here, right,
watching,
for
if
now.
you're watching, that's fine. We're old
Uh, right. If we get
curmudgeons.
picked up by
Yeah.
somebody, we'll expect them to for that money to come up with those utilities.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well,
So you know
it's
what I'm
all
noticing?
of our glorious sponsors.
Yes, you know what I'm noticing though? It's like even with Teams meetings or Zoom meetings or whatever, they'll always have now a link to like Poll EV or one of those other cloud services that do surveys where they ask questions there, even if they have the facilities within, like I said, Teams and Zoom, and they all have QA abilities, but people are still using those sites. So I'm like thinking, hold on a second, isn't that backwards? Isn't that the whole point was to consolidate into one area? Why are people going to those systems? Then I begin to realize, well, part of it is they want to keep track of the stuff in a particular way because then you can export that, right?
Right.
In some cases, export that. I'll give you an example. Like, remember planning poker, right?
Yes.
And now we can do planning poker like on ADO. We can do planning poker on any other ones. But is planningpoker.com still even being used?
Yes, it is.
But yes, you've seen it being used, right?
Absolutely.
How the
Yes.
heck can it survive if all these things are
It's
consolidated?
it's institutional inertia. I mean, once you set up a form, once you set up a process, you're
Right.
going to go back to that same one over and over again. It's why people buy Coke and Coke and Coke and don't switch to
Indeed.
Pepsi.
Well,
It's
yeah, and well, the convenience of it, it was created. If you think about it, when they came out, they were so freaking advanced, if for that matter. So
right,
it doesn't mean that a few years later that they really become obsolete. No, they're still technically speaking useful. They filled out their requirements and all that stuff.
right.
And it's like the idea again is like, I know how to do this. I'm just going to do it again. It might be like a half a step more work than somebody else doing the work, but if it's a half a step, it's not enough for me to move.
Right.
It's you have to have a significant change of everything in order to make people move. Or you set up a policy: no more planning poker.
Right.
Block it.
Well, well, and it's been that way forever. I mean,
Yes.
the old Word Perfect
Yes.
versus Microsoft Word.
Right.
I mean, the Word won because law offices started using Word, and
Yes.
Word Perfect missed the boat when they
Mhm.
did their first WYSIWYG version. They
Yes.
were they were not as good, and
Yeah, and
so
then they had different
they had
keys for
people
everything just
switch.
because they wanted to be different, right? So what is the universal help key? Was it F1 or was it F5? As an
Yeah.
example, I think the
Well,
F1 F5 thing to me was the death of WordPerfect.
Word Perfect had Control KC, right?
Uh, yeah,
And so the key, if you look at the old Word Perfect keystrokes, they ended up in Visual Studio because the people that were using Word Perfect were kind of more into that, and they came out of VI. There's a lot of differences there, but
ooh,
yeah, at the time, Word
interesting
Perfect
lore right there.
was pre standardization of those key sets like
That's
Control
right.
C, Control V. That
Hmm.
wasn't a Windows standard because Windows was new.
That's right.
So I mean, it's like that, and the other
I
one that
think that
gets
was like
me.
a 3270 standard or something. Remember the 3270?
Oh
The
yeah, 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 yeah. The
That's where a lot of the control insert, all that
VT
stuff, they,
100s
they
and
all
the
came
old
from that system. Yeah, that's how old we
yeah,
are, guys. We actually were actually
mainframe
console
console
terminal logins. Yep, my very first
terminal
email.
emulators. Right,
Yes.
I had a terminal emulator, a VT 100 emulator for my my IBM XT,
Yow.
an old
The
8086.
XT, that was 8086. That was before the Pentiums,
Yeah,
the pre
it had
Pentium
a
times.
had a 10 megabit. Oh, it was before the 286.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, that's right.
Yeah.
It was
the,
no, it was the original 8086.
it was the 8086, and there was the 286, the 386, the
It's
486, and then we
486,
got to
right?
the
Then the
Pentiums.
Pentium.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it had a 10 megabyte hard drive. I was uptown, David. This guy was, I was living large.
I still
Uh,
had my floppies going back then. Floppies, by the way, are not ears; they're actual discs that when you went like this, they made a
yep,
sound.
5 1/4 inch floppy drive. Yeah, gosh.
Yep. Speaking of,
So,
and of course, we were always safe from the internet because there was no way they could hack those things.
well, there was
That
no
was-
internet. Yeah,
there
it was.
well,
Yeah, I had the modem.
it was
out
there,
loud,
but you had to be in the government to have been using it, or in school. You
or in
know.
school, right? Well, so I would go to I'd go to Usenet through campus. I would dial into the uh, IBM VM machine,
Yes,
right, the mainframe,
that's
and
right.
get a timeshare and be able to interact through that using my terminal emulator. But there were also Wildcat bulletin board systems.
Oh yeah.
There was a local
That was
Wildcat.
more common. You basically you dialed into them directly into those servers wherever they were, and basically they were controlled. They were like basically little islands of
Right.
communications.
Well, and they would mesh together, and so you had a mesh network that was. The problem with it was the latency was somewhat. I mean, not the latency while you were on the board, but because they meshed nightly, you had like a 1 day latency to get messages to people in other regions. But
right.
yeah, no, it was outstanding.
Yeah.
What you could do in those.
What was the breakthrough? The breakthrough was the companies like CompuServe, AOL, and all that gave you the, so to speak, the community that was just bigger than a BBS.
Right.
You know,
right.
which had the chatting, the gaming, and all that stuff. That's when
That's
when it started breaking out. But that was still not yet on the internet.
That
Oh,
was
yeah, it was.
expensive. Good Lord.
That was still not yet on the internet. And I'm trying to think. At MSN, I remember when MSN was going to be one of those systems originally. And I remember I joined it in the beta when it was starting up. Microsoft said, hey, we got infrastructure. We can do that. So they started setting themselves up. And then, well, Bill, not so much prescient. Bill, I guess when you're at that level of the Bill Gates level,
Right.
you can talk to people in the right places and say, oh, what am I doing here? This is what's coming up. This is the way to go. And he did
build
say
out infrastructure for this when there's going to be public
going to be,
infrastructure
yes,
available
he
shortly.
saw it coming. He saw the money. The same thing happened to us with Reuters. In Reuters, because Reuters had perhaps before the internet, there was the Reuters net.
Right.
The kind of thing that could have been the internet. Right, it could have born from there. In fact, the salespeople said, "Hey, can you go talk to the developers in New York, do battle for us in New York, and find out why we can't have nice things?" It's like, well, they basically the developers in New York said, "Okay, fine, talk to us. We're going to tell you right now. There's companies like at the time it was not Sprint, whoever was pre-Sprint, the company that became Sprint, and a few of the other ones. They were building the infrastructure all over the country." They said, there's people building this infrastructure right now. We have infrastructure in place. However, we can never compete with them. We have to go in and build it our own. And if you want us to do what they're doing and beat them, then they said, you give us $40 million right now, we'll do it. And the salespeople were like, oh, we're not going to do that. We just spent $40 million in that big Globex thing. I said, yeah, but if you even want to keep up, now it's cheap. Because if you wait, and the guy said, if you wait 5 years from now, it's going to be out of our price range. It's literally going to be in the billions. And I said, nothing can cost the billions. Remember the time when billions used to be like the Dr. Evil, like no way you can even think about it?
That's
and
right.
Sure enough, it came to pass. Reuters, at least the old Reuters, not the current Reuters, at that time essentially bet against the internet for the fact that it's the Wild West and it was not secure. And of course, our system is the ultimate security. Well, it was, but guess what?
It was a closed network, right?
It was a closed network.
Yep. And the thing about a closed network is you own all of that network.
Yes.
But the downside of that is that you own all of that network.
All of that network, right. So it's up to you to bring it out. So it was fast. It was going over those T1 lines,
Yeah.
You had to have T1 connections to make use, which was pretty fast at the time, or so we thought.
Right. No, it was better than the 5600 kbaud modems and all of that.
That's true.
But it was still peer to peer, and
I can't even remember. What is T1 actually in speed?
T1's like 1112. I mean, not 1112. 112 megabits per second.
Megabits.
I think it's
Okay.
yeah.
Right, because now we have gig speed these days. So I'm just trying to put it in perspective of where it is now. We have surpassed T1 speeds already. We haven't passed. I don't know. Is fiber faster than us?
Oh yeah, fiber's fast. So
Oh, it's
1.54 megabits per second is a T1 line. Sorry, I just did a lookup.
got it.
So that's a T1.
Aha. And
Yeah,
that used to cost $200 a month for our clients just to have the connection, one connection, and they always had to have two, because if one went down, which didn't
right.
make sense to
You'd have
me,
to have
if one
two
went down, don't you think they both would go down? It's
Yeah,
like
it depends on where
I have my disaster recovery center in the same city as my main center. It's like, well, if the atom bomb comes, it's going to take both of them out. What are you thinking? Your
hurricane
your,
is. I
your
mean, yeah.
DR needs to be somewhere far away. Man.
Oh, but and all of those systems really, the thing about a T1 is you get a dedicated line with dedicated switches from point to point,
Yes.
and it is your line. You're not sharing it with anyone.
You're not even on the internet per se. You're literally on that single line. It is in a sense they call it the WAN. It was your area network. Forget it's not WAN or LAN. It's YAN. Your area network.
Your area network. You've
That's
leased a piece of copper from point A to point B.
Yes.
Now it goes digital in between, and there's some switches, but it's not something that people can look at and track. So
I mean, back then you didn't have to have a VPN. You just went to
your
line. You're done.
Right. You went to your line, and the cool thing about it is those leased lines required a connection at the far end as well. So it didn't scale the same way that the internet does, because
that's right.
You actually had to have an endpoint at the other end because you owned the line.
That's
it
right.
had to go into a switch. And so adding, doubling the number of clients meant doubling the number of ports you have internal to your network. So
yes.
But yeah, no, you speak of VPNs. I mean, that's the equivalent of a lease line today.
Yes.
You can still people are using VPNs now. We talked earlier, I don't know, did we talk about when Drew Koenig put about the Olympics in China?
Yes, that's right.
Telling people to buy burner phones. A lot of people use VPNs on their phones to have their traffic tunneled through something that is impenetrable, but
quote unquote impenetrable.
But they were talking specifically, just don't even take your device, because there are too many ways for your device to be
exactly
hacked. Even if you're running a VPN, your device is still connecting to a network.
Your device is still connecting. So at the end of the day, what does the VPN do? The VPN can do things like it could essentially take you to someplace else where the internet addresses and all that stuff is managed over there. An example, I think, where would be people using the current situation going on in some other parts of the world? If they wanted to connect somewhere, if they had a VPN account going somewhere, as long as that's not blocked, just straight up blocked, which of course you can't. Doesn't matter what VPN
you have. Data traffic that's flowing, then you can use a VPN to sort of spoof your exit location. Yes. So one of the things that happens, I'm in New York City. I'm working for this company that's out of Minneapolis, or it used to be. I used to be working for a company that's out of Minneapolis. We've been bought and moved and whatever. But when I would turn on my VPN to connect to my internal resources, I could only connect to them with internal IP addresses, which I would get as part of my VPN. Any sites that I went to, like Yahoo or Alta Vista or any of those guys, Ask Jeeves, any of those sites that I went to would show me as being from Minneapolis, as opposed to being from New York.
That's right.
Because that's my exit point into the internet. And so it's a VPN is like that lease line that you were talking about earlier, Ralph.
Except in the end of the day, though, you still have to connect to the Minneapolis office. If somebody knows, somebody somewhere will know that you're connecting from here to there. They may not be able to go in and see what you're doing, but they happen to know that you are attempting to connect out. the person at the endpoint will not know. They'll only be able to go as far as, say, the Minneapolis
Well,
point. Or can they figure out? Can they look at that and say, I know where you're really coming from? Can they do that?
a lot depends on that person that's at that far end, right? Because it's a leased line, right?
Yes.
A VPN is nothing but a leased line. So the company that's providing you with a VPN is giving you an exit. Now, what they're saying, what you're trusting them to do is not keep track of where you're coming from, not keep a record of your, originating IP address, and not keep track of where you go when you exit, because they see both ends, right? They see the cable that you're connecting, they see that line, and they also can monitor the traffic that you're going out in.
So, word of warning.
Not all VPNs are created equal. Yeah,
exactly. So corporate VPNs are more likely to do that because it's to behooves their own security to know where the heck, right? And to keep track of it, audit purposes, you name it, they're going to know. So here's the thing: if you're, it's different for like the so-called commercial, I can buy a VPN software pieces. So in those particular cases, they're connecting to somebody else, like somebody who's selling that service. Is that like Is that what DuckDuckGo and all those folks are all about? Who are those? Who are those folks? Who are the VPN people that are out there?
Oh, I don't know.
That's
we can look some up.
Actually, Raquel will ask about this.
So there's definitely NordVPN. That's the top one that I think about.
That's the one that I've seen all advertised like crazy, all over the place. I think that's ubiquitous almost because a lot of folks I'm hearing use that.
Yeah, that was the top one that came up.
Azure has a VPN.
Surfshark.
Surfshark, I've heard of. Who else have we heard of here? But is DuckDuckGo is not a VPN, or is it?
ExpressVPN. No,
Express, yeah.
DuckDuckGo is an alternative to Google.
Oh, I see.
So they're a search engine.
They're a search engine. That's right.
Right.
So there's a difference. VPN is we're going to let you go wherever you need to go. However, you're going to go through us. Right. And we are that party in the middle that's taking care of stuff.
We're not going to let anyone see where you're coming from, and we're not going to let anyone see where you're going.
However, those companies are in places where jurisdiction or whatever could decide to say, "Hey, where are you over here? You're in my country." Well, we're knocking on your doors. You're going to tell us where the heck that VPN
is. Because it is still a dedicated line, right? That's the essence of a VPN. It's a single path from point to point, and so you can monitor all outgoing traffic and all incoming traffic, and you can kind of probably maybe figure it out. But
let's just say if you have a physical location somewhere, they can come get you. Mm-hmm. Unless your physical location is Greenland or someplace hard.
So here's another option.
Okay. Clicking on the link here.
Tor.
Hold on. Tor. Let me go. Let's just share screen here for just a second. Actually, you should share from your area because I have a feeling I have work stuff. So I know mine.
Yeah, let me drop.
You have the multi-screen. I don't have my multi-screen. Otherwise, I would do it.
No worries. Yeah. So
you can tell by grainy video that I'm using the laptop's video. There we go.
Here's Tor. So Tor is another option. Instead of creating a single pipe like a VPN, right? It connects point to point, and then you're anonymizing the traffic between those 2 points.
Yes.
Okay. There's an encryption, so no one can see the traffic that's flowing through. They might be able to see that there's a pipe.
Yes.
But they're not going to be able to tell what's happening inside of it. So that's what a VPN is all about.
Mm-hmm.
If your exit point is in a free location, right, is in a place where the people that you're trying to hide your traffic from don't have jurisdiction.
Yes.
Then they can know that you're going out, but they can't know what you're doing. Okay. Now, the Tor is the onion router. And what Tor does is, instead of doing a single pipe, Tor is like one of those wolf spider networks. Okay. It is connections to everything. to everyone, and it sends packets all over the place. So what a Tor router does, what a Tor browser does, is instead of having a single request and response, it breaks that request up into a multitude of requests and sends them out into the world.
That's almost like the same reason why we sometimes shred paper and put them in like 5 different trash cans. Yes. But then if someone knows where all those trash cans are, they can probably put it together. But usually they'll never ever get the full picture.
Right. So the idea behind Tor traffic is that you break it down and you break it up into a lot of pieces. And the key is if you're wanting to hide a needle, you don't hide it in a haystack. Okay?
Right.
Because if you find a needle in a haystack, you're like, well, how did this get here? Right. You hide a needle in a box of needles. That's where you had a needle.
That's true.
And so this Tor
you have
traffic,
to find the needle. This is the needle. It's in a box of needles in many haystacks.
It's the same thing that happens with schools of fish. Okay, when a predator comes at a school of fish, they scatter.
Right.
And each individual fish is more likely to survive. Well, this is scattering out your requests, and then it brings them all back together at the end. So the onion router, it's got many layers. That's why it's the onion. Right?
The power of the cloud brings it is what it gives it the ability to bring it together. Because otherwise, that sounds like massive processing just to enable that ability.
Right. Well, but it's many layered. So my request goes out, but it's wrapped in all of these layers, and each time it bounces to a new place, it'll get opened up and maybe split into 2 and then move on. And then eventually all of those requests come back and are funneled back into me. So yeah, it's not a VPN basically is very small overhead.
Right.
Okay. Because it's a dedicated pipe. You're just encrypting it at both ends. Tor is not. But it's also more secure. It's secure in a different way.
Tor is basically, without having to have that overhead, they send it all over the place on the basis that they can't find you because they have to know that you're even you, right? Because in this particular case, they have to recognize you in order to bring it back together on their own. At the very least, they have to know what it is that they're looking for. If they're not looking for you, all they see is pieces all over the place. Right, well, they might recognize a piece might belong to somebody, but they don't know what the big picture is, so they can never put it together. Right. Very nice.
Now they might because you're using Tor, they can see that it's Tor traffic, and you might come up on the radar for that.
Right. Okay? Well, then they'll know that you're trying to do something. The worst of the case, this is what I'm saying. It's like the word of warning that even the website could be blocked from a country completely. Right, you could never ever get to that. Maybe you can try going via IP address. If they know what it is, they'll block it. Your act of getting to the first step, if that's blocked, you're out. Doesn't matter what software, whatever it is you're trying to use. But that will depend usually at the local level. And sometimes the act of doing that sometimes will block everybody out. So a lot of people will not do that. They won't block something because it's basically shooting the nose to spite their face, essentially. Right, because if it's like, well, the only way I can stop it, if I block everything, yeah, I can. It'll be stopped. Yeah, but you blocked everything. Now you can't even get out. Right. Well, I don't need to get out. Yes, you do. Yeah, I need to get out. And the moment you open that door, you've opened it for everybody else. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, what was that when?
Sorry about that.
Remember. The old Casino Royale movie, the original one, the comedy one. All right, and then they had like one guy was explaining to Lashif that he failed in stopping one of the bonds, and then the phone booth blew up, and blew up a hole in of course the Berlin Wall, because it was in Berlin. That's where all the spies hang out. And sure enough, all these people came out, people in carriages. They were all ready to go. I said the moment there was a little hole, people will exploit it. Same thing here. The moment there's a little hole, here comes the traffic.
Yeah. And all you have to do is get that first little hop. If you can get outside, if you can get that
once you're out,
hop,
that's it.
You're out.
Freedom.
Tunneling is something that is straightforward now, and there's software to do it. It used to be hard, right? We used to play games and do tunnels, but it was harder to get those set up because you had to do a lot more manual work. But now it's just, go to one of these more reputable, okay, not one of the the little guys.
We're not here to discuss exactly who is reputable, who is not.
Right.
We're just saying that we might have heard of X and Y. They might have had this particular reputation. Here's the thing, though: if somebody's been out there for quite a number of years, chances are they may be okay, because by now somebody would have come up, maybe would and said,
Yeah.
"These guys, watch out."
But here's the thing, right? We say that.
Yes.
But do you remember, what was it? Star SSL? So there was a company that was giving, or that made it very easy to create SSL certificates. They had an automated process, and they were out of Israel, and they were good, and they were cheap, and I used them. Okay. Then they were purchased. The company was purchased by a company in China who put a back door into the root certificate and was printing out their own versions of these certificates. Therefore, they were able to bypass and block, or they would be able to play the man in the middle card.
Right.
Because that's really what SSL certificates are about. And maybe we haven't talked about the man in the middle, so it's a
right.
Let me take just a moment to do that. So
go ahead.
If you think about back in the day when you were little, maybe you made a phone out of cups,
right,
and string. Okay.
Right.
So someone would talk in one side, and the message would travel down the string and end up on the other side. Okay.
That's right.
And that's kind of what our internet connections are. Now, if someone were to cut the string and put two cups, and put one by his ear and the other by his mouth, he would be the man in the middle. He would be in between the two messages. Okay. And if you don't recognize the voice, if your quality is not high enough that you can recognize that the voice has changed, they could intercept the message and do whatever they wanted to with it, right? They could change it and do nasty things. Now, the way that we keep that from happening in the internet is we have these things called SSL certificates, okay? And they are cryptographically hard, which means that there's a root certificate that you trust. And once you trust that root certificate, there's layers of trust built on top of it so that you can say, yes, this message is coming from this person. Yes. Okay, so that means that if I send the message out and it comes in and it's got that valid SSL certificate, that means that it actually came from the person it says it's from. Now, if I can fake or create alternate versions of those SSL certificates, I can sit in the middle and be the man in the middle, and I can watch all of your traffic. I can change the traffic as it goes through.
Right. Essentially, it's not that you're changing the game; is you've just taken over the game in this particular case.
Right.
Right. Because the whole point again is to verify the identity. The idea is, so if you control who does is this guy okay? If you're in control of that, then it's moot. It's essentially it's over.
Yeah, it's changing the game. It's and whether they're doing something nefarious or not, it's no longer secure.
That's right.
That's the key.
So things to think about. Well, the red flag there, of course, is they were really good and cheap, and they got bought out. So anytime there's any kind of change,
right,
it's always good to
check the management and all of that. It's especially if it matters. If you're just wanting to, for example, watch a baseball game that's blacked out because you're in Chicago or New York, and the game is being broadcast locally, but you're not able to see it.
That's right.
Because you're in the local market.
That's right. You're in the local market and it's behind the paywall. Exactly.
So, but you can use a VPN to pretend to be somewhere else. Pretend to be somewhere else, and that would give you a chance to see it without that blackout window. So people do things like that, and if it's that great, VPNs are fine. No one's really probably going to come after you with a machete or a gun if you're doing that. But there are people that are in situations, especially nowadays, that that they need to spend a little bit more due diligence on the VPN. Another thing that you can do though is a VPN doesn't have to be something that you buy from a company. Okay,
Right.
if you have a trusted family member or someone that can open up a VPN connection, you can basically
That's right. You
sell
can make your
into
own.
their internet.
Anyone with a machine can be a VPN place, because that's
Right.
just this is just networking protocols. Is all this is all about. You can enable it.
It's just a tunnel. It's so what would happen is you would be going into their internet connection, bouncing off of their machine and coming out as if you were them.
Yes.
Okay. And from your machine to their machine, there would be an encrypted pipe that no one could see into.
Right.
Okay.
Ooh, fun stuff.
So there is that.
Yeah. so let's say the moral of the story is the old stuff that we used to do still works because you can still do it. Don't trust a man. No. What's the other story?
No,
You can
the
pay
other part of
for
the
it, but
story is-
as they say, they all have the levels of trust. You get what you pay for, to be sure.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And just
and
because
it's a
you
good
pay
idea.
for it, it doesn't mean that it's good.
That's true.
There's that too. You know, snake oil, right? There's a lot of scams and things like that. But yeah, I mean, you need to understand enough. I think that if we're gonna have a big moral, the big moral is understand enough about what you're trying to do
Right.
to tell if you're actually doing it well.
Yes. Otherwise, if you're going to, how do you say, the less you know. Actually, this is the case of ignorance is not bliss.
It's not
In this particular case. If your goal is for the security, for all this stuff, ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is the case of like, well, you know what? I really don't care. I'm jumping out the plane. I don't care. I'm fine. You know, if that's the case, if that's the goal, that's fine. You're having a good time. I went to the beach. I'm not going to ask if the sharks are coming by. I'm just going to the beach. No problem. All right. But you can't be, here's the thing. You can't be too paranoid that you're not doing anything because, oh my gosh, they're everywhere. All right. Again, like the fishes, think about those fishes. There's so many of them. The chances of you being one of those that they're going to come and hit, it's not as high as you think, but don't be like the fish that says, "Hey, shark, I'm here," with the big neon sign on them either, right? You know, it's like, well, yeah, I'm not going to find you amongst thousands of fishes, but that's all the fishes are, laying low. Just don't be like the big, come and get me. I have unpatched OS software for a couple years.
The tallest nail gets hit by the hammer.
Yes.
Right? The longest blade of grass gets cut first.
Gets cut. Yes.
Wow. If you want to read
coming out of our ears.
If you want to read some nice fiction about it, just for fun,
yes.
Cory Doctorow.
Oh, Doctorow. I haven't done a Doctorow novel in a while.
Little Brother is a good one, and Homeland. That whole series is good. It talks about, talks about the network and about passing clandestine information, and it's good. Well researched.
It's sci-fi, yeah. Quote unquote. All right, Raquel, did you learn something in this show?
Definitely.
Oh, okay. So even if Raquel learned, I think we accomplished something today, because Raquel actually we started out. This is going to be like ask me anything. Raquel has a question. Is how we thought about it. Then we started going in, and we somehow was able to segue into it, and that wasn't exactly planned. It just worked out. It went chit, and we got our question answered.
So it's the Little Brother series by Cory Doctorow. Not going to get any money from him. He's not sponsoring the work. I like the way he does his. I like his politics. Let's just say that. I'll stop.
Okay. All right, but how about the thing is sometimes it's not about that. It's about how good they make their dialogue. How do the characters act? Do they make you feel? That came up today. In fact, that came up with the biggest boss of bosses of one of my bosses, and we talked about it's like sometimes it's and they said, is it about the achievement? Do you have to have the reward, the accolade, and all that stuff? I said, think about the best stories that are out there. The McMurtry stories and all that stuff. They have no endings. They just end with like they seem to fizzle, or it's like a sad ending or something like that. why would people want to get that? It's like, well, here's the thing. The fact is they read it all the way to the end to be disappointed, which means it was a good book because they freaking read it all the way to the end.
That's
right. If they read it to the end, if enough for them to be disappointed. If they hated the ending of Game of Thrones, well, you know what? He doesn't give a hoot because you watched it. You watched the whole thing right up to the end where we just took it away from you. And you know what? When we come out with it again, you'll probably watch it again. Hello. Because
watch the end of Lost.
It's exactly. It's about the trouble, and it's about all the interactions that are in there. So like a book like that, like Foundation to me was like that. It's sort of like didn't matter where it eventually went, but it was about all those little stories that just added up, the drama, all the pieces. Yeah, so even the Lonesome Dove stories were like that as well. They were westerns, and that was not my thing. But my writer coach said you should read that, and you'll see what we're talking about. Then I started reading. I'm like, oh, so now I know what you mean. And then I started getting into it. It's because not because like you would never ever want to be in a western or like that would not be my lifestyle ever. Whatever it is, he made good characters. And he would mix and match the characters dealing with each other at whatever times. Those are the things. So I'm hoping Dr. O does the same for us. Oh,
yeah, it's good.
Hero's Journey on Wikipedia. Yeah. There's another link.
The hero's journey is what we're talking about here as well, right? That's in order to engage you, in order to bring you into the story. Right. There are these contracts, these sort of expectations that people have when they start reading books. And they start listening to stories, and the hero's journey is a common trope that that you can map onto pretty much any of the standard modern movies that you
got it. And so even the anti-hero, that's why the anti-heroes are still are the people that we love to hate, as they say, will get, unfortunately for good or ill. The problem may be for some people that take that and like, oh, that'll make that my way of living. It's like, that was not what it's meant to be. Remember, this is like art. That's like saying, okay, I'm going to be as dizzy looking as the Starry Night. It's like, that's what you're saying. No, you're going to enjoy it. You're going to absorb it, but it doesn't mean that you're going to like punch your eyes out. So that's what you see all the time. Yeah.
Now, and I'm one last one, because I'm sorry, I'm coming up with all of these things that I know
now it's coming out.
Let me just point you at tvtropes.org.
Ooh.
If you're unfamiliar with it, tvtropes.org is a great site. They have a lot of those tropes that we talked about, right?
Right.
And a good one is Chekhov's gun.
This is not Mr. Chekhov from Star Trek, right? This is Chekhov, the writer.
If in the first act you show a gun, by the third act someone should get shot.
That's right.
Okay, actually, that's the idea.
My writer coach said exactly that.
Yes, and that's Chekhov's gun. If you look up Jumping the Shark, the TV show is
Happy Days. That was Henry Winkler. Literally, the Fonz literally jumping the shark.
The Fonz literally jumping a shark on skis. The show had lost its way. So you can look up TV tropes on here, and they're a lot of fun to play with and look at, your favorite TV shows and see if they are following through on any of these. There are spoilers in there. Be careful if you've not watched.
Another nice cloud resource. There we go.
Another nice cloud resource. And then we'll go. I'm sorry.
And then we'll go. All right. Okay. Meanwhile, Raquel's taking notes.
Yes.
All right. Well, I think we're in a good shape. Let's call this show, and we're going to be back in a couple of weeks. I'm taking a break next week, and Raquel has got actually duties for helping us out, for us being able to enabling us to get out there. Thank you, Raquel. Don't worry, you will be rewarded as you've been recently.
I am babysitting my grandma, just so the world knows.
There we go. That's true. That's because God forbid she gets on the internet.
Look out.
No. Oh no.
I mean, she already has, but I don't know how that worked out. Okay.
Well, so far it's the case of security by obscurity, but that I'll say no more beyond that.
All right. Well, all right. Have a good week. Have a good weekend. We'll see you in 2 weeks, and we will pick this back up with a lot more news from the cloud.
All right, news from the cloud. We're gonna say bye-bye. Say bye.
Bye.
Say bye, Ruffy.
Jazz hands.
Okay. This one's going on spring break. Bye.